Hey everyone, so this video goes out to all the people out there who have maybe more than one interest and more than one passion and they're confused. Because there's a lot of advice and career advice or just life advice that seems to be pointing you in one direction. Follow your passion as if it's a singular thing and you can't have multiple passions or interests or if you do, you're weird or you're not normal and it's not the normal thing to do, or the fact that you need to have just one thing. And I'm here to sort of clear things up and just illustrate with examples of successful people and readings how what's true and what's not true, basically. So let's just get started. And if you like this video, leave it a like and hit the subscribe button. So what does this mean? Well, first off, let me just point to all the advice out there that makes it seem like you only need one passion. There's obviously all these successful, sometimes wealthy individuals who have achieved success in their life saying, follow your passion, do what you love. And then there's others out there who say you have to find that one skill set that you have to work on. And they're not completely wrong. But it's a bit of a nuanced topic. And long story short, it's perfectly fine to have multiple passions, as I read up on and really just discovered. It's normal. And the best example I can give is a recent example I saw from a video of a man who literally was about to possibly be recruited to play professional soccer on a very well-known team. I think it was Manchester United, and he was at that caliber level, but he unfortunately got injured and he went through very intricate surgery on his knee to try and get it fixed, and he was in deep pain and he couldn't play for a year, and it put him into deep depression. But he got out of it, and then for the next year he tried to get back on track, but he ended up not being able to do it. And the position he played for, midfielder, required a lot of work, and it was a very vital role, and he just couldn't do it after his injury. And then he took up music, and he started getting into music design and electronic music composition, and after many years of work he ended up making a very, very comfortable living doing what he does, composing with music. And I mean, there's so many life lessons in that in itself, and it's not the only athlete I know of who was at the caliber to compete on a professional level but could not do it. And I will link you in the description the interview for this soccer player that I just mentioned, if you guys don't believe me. And another great one's Lewis Howes, a man who wanted to play. He was an athlete in, I believe it was American football, and he got injured, and he was out of league. He was kicked out, and he couldn't do it. And then he created an enormous following, and he created a lot of wealth through a completely different interest, because he kind of had to. Like, football was out for him, and that was his central goal. And by chance, one event just ruined it for him, and he created a pretty deep YouTube following, and he has a great occupation now as a LinkedIn professional of the new professional network LinkedIn, and it's a social network, and he does consulting for that, and he has this enormous YouTube channel. And recently he did an interview with Tony Robbins. So it's very interesting how these people have leveraged other interests, because they kind of had to. They couldn't compete on a physical level anymore. And because they had different interests, and because they could spur that into other occupations that made them money, it allowed them to survive in the world. So it can be a very vital thing. And both of these athletes, they were not predicting or expecting these chance occurrences to happen where they just end up getting injured, and they can't do what they've devoted their life to doing. And I think the reason why what a lot of people give advice on having a central passion or destiny to be somewhat true is the fact that oftentimes the world is a very competitive place, and we think we're really good at what we do when in reality we get egotistical and we don't realize how competitive the world is, and therefore it oftentimes takes many years and hours of consistent practice for years to get very good at a skill to a point where you can excel at a level where people notice you, and you're worth a damn for people to pay you to do it, because the world's a very competitive place, and nowadays even more, especially things that are have low barrier to entry. People can pick it up and learn it online at very low cost, and you're now competing against the world. So it's one of those things where it's kind of true. You only have so much time on this earth. If we had infinite time on this earth, things would be completely different, but we don't, and therefore you have to get good at one specific thing and then just plow it. But if you're one of those people struggling with different interests, it's not a total loss. Now, having said that, though, you really have to know where you stand, because there's that group of people who just, they're constantly paralyzed by that. What if I miss out on this or that? And they think they're too arrogant, and they think that they can be good at singing and performance and acting and dancing and computer science and computer programming and organic chemistry and all this stuff at the same time, and they think they can be experts at it. And they say, "Oh, I have all these passions," and then they just get paralyzed, and they never do anything to further themselves. They never really pick one or two things, and it's just a complete mess. But having one backup isn't bad. Having too many is not the best thing. Oftentimes people think they're much better than they think, and they never really when you ask them, like, well, what have you taken acting lessons? Have you gone out and done covers to songs and sung them and then uploaded them on YouTube and seen whether a objective audience that doesn't know you thinks about how well you actually sing? And have you tried reaching out? And I mean, just going back to my example with the man who got into music, I mean, there's so many life lessons in that relate specifically and that can help you out. One of them being the fact that he had one backup, but he also did a bunch of stuff, as explained in the interview, on how amazingly how much time he spent just crafting a skill, practicing it, and working on it, and then getting himself known. Apparently he did a ton of cold calling and dialing and emailing and networking to let his brand and let people know about him. And those two things are so important. Like, you'll ask these people who are like, oh, one day I want to, it will just happen to me. I'll be an actress. Or one day, I have all these interests: dancing, singing, acting, and also I want to be a scientist and a doctor and a lawyer. And they never do anything. And they never really, when you ask them about their life, and whether they actually practice or get better at it, it's like, nope, they're staying at home every single day watching Netflix. It's like you're not improving, and they're kind of using all these interests as a bit of a crux. But oftentimes, there's also that other group of people who are just very confused with their life, and they don't know what they're gonna do, and they don't know, should I choose this, should I do that, and they think that they know who they are, but in reality, they're just in their um, mid 20s or early 20s, or they're 18 years old, and they're just really confused and they don't know what they want to do. And sometimes that's okay, Ellen DeGeneres is an example of someone who, she didn't know what she wanted to do, and ultimately she finally, after going through uh, 6 or 7 careers, from oyster shucker to waitress to hostess to vacuum cleaner salesperson to house painter, um, she finally, stumbled across stand-up comedy, and she spent 10 years perfecting her craft at that, starting at local clubs, coffee shops, and then eventually getting on TV. So I mean, I actually wrote an article on this whole thing. Like, Ellen had a very long life before she got into even talk show hosting, and it's a very interesting life. And you can tell she went out there, she took action, she tried things out, and she worked on her skills, even when she was unsure. And I think that's a big thing. Like, a lot of people just, they're not even doing anything. They're just sitting there. And again, back to the musician example, he apparently, along with his partner, um, they both worked full-time jobs, and then they went out and they went off and uh, pretty much worked on their craft whenever they had free time. And that's one of the another huge thing. It's like people give all these excuses like, "Oh, I have a full-time job. I don't have time." These are people like that break all these excuses and just destroy them. Like, these people literally had full-time jobs, and yet um, they still had time to do all this stuff when they were off, perfecting their craft at musicianship, and then doing a bunch of cold calls and emails and stuff to get themselves known, and working on their craft and getting better and better, and finally making a living off of it through contracting out their work and stuff. And it's just amazing how that's happened. Like, literally, both of these individuals were people who um, uh, they had pretty, I guess you can say, not too glamorous full-time jobs as well, which is saying something. One was a housekeeper, and the other was a pizza delivery guy full-time, and then they did all this on the side. So it's just amazing. Like, I think a lot of people discount that and don't really understand it or realize it or have really researched it enough. Um, they have all sorts of excuses like, well, this job is not glamorous enough for me, or um, uh, I can't take job flipping burgers. And it's like, why not? If you can, if you need the money, you can do that, and then work on it on your side. Like, if there's a will, there's a way, and there's a will. My name's Will, so there's always a way. Um, so finally, I guess I want to conclude with the final example. Again, back to the musicianship, the musician story. Um, so one last thing he remarked on was the fact that what he did with his musicianship. He's remarked on the fact that he's seen so many people, or a handful of people, who are ridiculously skilled and talented at what they do, but another huge side to the equation for success is that you have to get out there and let people know of your presence. And he says that's a huge issue. Like, these people had 0 views on their material, uh, close to 0 likes, 0 actual like downloads, 0 everything on all their music, and you can easily tell that they're exceptionally talented. And unfortunately, the world is set up in a sort of networking way, and he remarked on the fact that, like, you can't just wait there and wait for someone to find you and for success to come to you. You kind of have to go out there and find it. And so that's another big thing. Like, you can have all these skills and abilities and so forth, but oftentimes you have to get out there and be known. And there's all sorts of inefficiencies in the world where um, you can't just you can't just think that the world's a place where everything will work out, and um, all you need to do is be exceptionally good at what you're doing, and then one day you'll be found. Unless you're exceptionally skilled at a very unique thing, and you're way above your competition, oftentimes you have to kind of network and stuff like that, especially in certain industries. Um, and again, you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt because it is a nuanced topic, depending on the industry and topic. If you're damn good at it, you'll be known. And if you deserve uh, what to be paid, and you deserve the value you're bringing forth, generally, you could end up finding it eventually without going out and connecting. Um, so yeah, and then finally the last nuanced thing I want to say is that I hate to be so technical, but I don't want to miss out on anything. The last thing I want to say is that as far as nuanced things go, sometimes you have to be very careful because you can have what you want. Forget it. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching. Like, favorite, comment, and subscribe to this video if you haven't already. And I guess to conclude with the whole main topic of this video, it's okay if you have multiple interests. Just make sure that you don't fall into that paralysis state where you're mainly just not doing anything, using those interests as a sort of crutch, but realizing that it's good to have more than one interest and passion in life. You never know if it maybe end up being a backup, or it may be used together with your initial interest. That's one thing that the investor businessman Charlie Munger does a lot. He has many models. He calls them mental models, and he says that the more you have, the better it is, because if you have too few, you end up being you end up having the man with the hammer syndrome, where every problem looks like a nail. And basically, when you have different mental models like Munger has, where you have one in science and one in physics, one in economics, and all these mental models, you can use them to effectively gauge whether this scenario is actually truly a scenario that can be solved by only a hammer, or maybe you're just biased in your thinking. So yeah, I think that's all we want to say, and I think it's very interesting now that you look at it like that, because before I even thought about it this way, I was just thinking to myself, like, I used to think you only needed one interest, but now that I think about it in this way, it's kind of like having multiple interests is part of how our genetics have made us become, because of how there's so many different occupations. We're just naturally interested in different things in life, and that can help us in a lot of ways. It can serve as a backup, or it can serve as something that just enriches our lives. So that's that my spiel on this whole thing. Again, take my advice or whatever you call this discussion with a grain of salt. I'm not some sort of expert or guru, just a guy on the internet voicing my opinion and trying to help out people out there. So again, my advice could be flawed as well. And that's all I really want to say, and thanks so much for watching. See ya.